Okay, I want you to find the product in this. Sounds simple, I know. This is not the example problems, but you distribute 5x to 2x and 5x to 3. So it's 5x times 2x and 5x multiplied by 3. So the x times the x takes you to x to the second, and then 5 times 2 is 10. Then you have a factor of x, and 5 times 3 is 15. Those do not go together, so you write 10x to the second plus 15x. They cannot go together. That's x. That's multiplied by x second. That's multiplied by x. Okay. Now, next problem. You can put a 1 in front of the x if you want, or you can just take, so you're taking negative 2x times 1x, and then negative 2x times negative 6. So x times x, x second, and then negative 2, and then x, and then 12. Okay, so negative 2x to the second plus 12x. Okay, now what's the point of this nonsense? Well, what you have to do is get back to here, and here's why you need to know how to do that. We're going to be solving equations that look just like this. You have an x to the second and an x. Those cannot be combined in any way, shape, or form. Okay, they are not like terms. You're going to be introduced to something today. If you took Algebra 1 last year, if you weren't part of the COVID Algebra 1 group, not that that's anything you can do about that, you're doing what's called factoring properties. Okay, all the other equations we've done up to this point are linear properties. Okay, now solve the equation. Now here's what you're going to do first. You're going to make a solution box down in the corner, and you're going to put what the heck you have for x's. You have x second and x. If I have x second and x, I have to apply factoring properties. Properties means rules. You can write rules. I usually, properties is the appropriate term. Now, you're going to put how many answers, because you have x to the second, there are 2 answers to this equation. Okay. Now, if you're applying factoring properties, the first thing you need is for the equation to equal 0, and this one does. Now, you count how many terms you have. You have 2 terms. That's known as a binomial. Okay, 2 terms. What you need to do is rewrite this expression in factored form. For today, you're going to just do a box. You're going to make a parentheses with a little line outside, and outside the line, you're going to label it GCF right there. Okay. Okay, so these are the 2 terms. The 0 is going to be rewritten over here, equals 0. Now, here's how you do a GCF. It stands for greatest common factor, greatest common factor, greatest common factor. So I look at the 2 terms, and they both have x. So I have this x on the end here in the final term. So I need to put x right there. I'm going to need to factor out x. Then I check the front and see if that number's negative. It's not. If it is, you put a negative right in front. Okay. First you check the final term and see if it has x. If it does, it goes here. Then you check the front term, see if it's a negative. Then 8 and 24. You're going to go to a multiplication table if you don't know it, and you start bottom up. Bottom up. Here's the first time I see 8, and 24 is in that row. So 8 is the greatest common factor. Now 8 and 24 are both also in the 4th row, but it wouldn't be the greatest common factor. Greatest common factor is down here at 8. So 8 and 24 is 8. So you wrap that in a parentheses, and you come up here and you divide both of these by 8x, not just 8, 8x. So 8 divided by 8 is 1, and then I divide x second by x. Here's how that's done. X second divided by x, it means x times x, because that's x to the second, divided by x. Now these 2 cancel, but I have a remainder of x, so I put x right alongside the 1. Then I divide 24 by 8, and that's 3. Okay, whatever it is in this GCF is what I bring up here and divide by, both of them. Then x divided by itself right here just cancels it out. It's a wipeout is what I call it. So we've rewritten this 8x times 1x, 8x times 3, but I've rewritten it in what's called factored form. So you bring those 2 parentheses, the 8x and the 1x plus 3 over here. Now one thing, if x has a 1 in front of it, get rid of it. That's stupid to have. Now if it's an 8, you don't get rid of it. Now you set each one of these factors equal to 0. 8x equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0. So we have multiplication by 8 here. We divide both sides by 8, and x equals 0. There's your first answer. Here you just got plus 3 and then a minus 3. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Okay, next problem. Negative 4x to the second power minus 12x equals 0. So I make my answer box. Okay, so I have x above the answer box. Put what you have for x's. If you're not doing that, I'm not going to feel a bit sorry for you when you get confused later. You got those two things. Again, you apply factoring properties. If you want to put FP, that's fine. So there's two answers. I put how many answers I'm going to be finding in factoring properties, because x second. Then you need one equation equal to 0. You have it, so you're good. Now again, it's a binomial. That's all you're going to see is binomials. There's two terms, the negative 4 multiplied by x to the second, and the negative 12 multiplied by x. Okay, minus 12 means it's a negative 12. So I make this box. I make a line outside of parentheses. It's like I'm undistributing it. Now, three things you check for in a GCF. You check if there's an x at the end, or a variable. There is x. Then you check the front if it's negative, this number here. Again, you check here for x. If it's there, you put it. You check in front for a negative, and it's there, so I put a negative out there. I'm factoring out a negative because it's all based on that front term. See up here, my first term was not negative, so I didn't put a negative. Here the first term is negative, so we put a negative. Then 4 and 12. There's 4 and 12 both in row 4. They're also in row 2, but they're in row 4, so 4 is the greatest common factor. Then this negative 4x you bring up here, the whole thing. You don't just divide by 4, you don't just divide by negative 4, the whole expression. So negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1. Then I divide the x second by the x. I get an x remainder. Now that is a negative 12 divided by a negative 4. Okay? Minus 12 means that'll be divided as a negative 12. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Then x divided by itself is the wipeout. So I put equals 0 here, and then I write the two parentheses that I've factored. It's like I've taken that expression and made it into two simpler expressions. Get that ridiculous 1 off the x. So negative 4x could equal 0, or x plus 3 could equal 0. So I divide by negative 4, 0 divided by negative 4 is 0. And over here I'm minus 3. X equals negative 3. Okay, next problem. Negative 12x to the second power plus 12x equals 0. Okay. So we have x to the second and we have x, so we apply factoring properties. Okay. Factoring properties, you make sure you're at 0, you are. Okay. So if you're at 0, check it off. There's two answers. Put how many answers there are before you move up here. So on the other side of 0, we have two terms. It's a binomial. Okay. So if I say binomial, it means two terms. So you make your GCF box. Great. GCF stands for greatest common factor. Equals 0 is going to come over here. So I check the last term and see if it has a variable. Yes, x is on the last term. That means x is going to be common to all of these. Okay, take the x from the last slot, the last term. Now you check the front of the problem and see if there's a negative there, the first term. Yes, the first number, the very first term is negative, so we need a negative. Then 12 and 20. No, it wouldn't be 12, wouldn't be 6. 12 and 20 would be 4. So I divide by negative 4x. Negative 4x. That's what I'm going to be dividing by. So that's positive 3. Then I divide the x second by the x. That always gives me a remainder of x. 20 divided by negative 4 is negative 5. And then x divided by itself is just a cancellation. So those are your two factors. Now you've converted it into two simpler expressions. And you apply the zero product property, f1, f2. That means we set each factor equal to 0. What I'm doing from here to here is known as the zero product property. All I'm doing is taking that expression and rewriting it undistributed. So now the parts are simpler. Okay, divide by negative 4, and that's 0. Over here, plus 5, 3 times x equals 5. I divide 5 by 3. 5 divided by 3 is 1.6 repeating. I don't want to see a repeating sign, okay? And if you do, for example, 5 divided by 3 goes on forever, hits second, and then PRB. Now it takes it to 1 2/3, which is the appropriate way to write an answer like that. I'm not against decimals, just not the one. I don't like repeating bars for solutions. Okay. See, and here's a way you can check your answer. Let's substitute 0 in for the x's. Should equal 0. Yep. Now let's substitute 1 2/3 in for the x's. 1 ABC2 ABC3 to the second plus 20, 1 ABC2 ABC3, 0. See, I'm doing it right. So that's why it's two answers. 20x to the second power plus 30x equals 0. Okay, so you got x second and you got x. So you apply factoring properties in. These are two different degrees of x. They cannot be combined. And we'll be doing that throughout the class. If I have x to differing degrees, we have to use factoring properties. There's two answers because you have x to the second. That's how you know that right away. Okay, 0's there. So, you've set up your greatest common factor. So does the last term have x? Yes. Does the first term have a negative? No. So 20 and 30, greatest common factor wouldn't be 20. Here's 20 and 30 in row 10. Again, we're putting the x there because of here. We're not putting the negative because this front thing is a positive. Okay, whether you have to put a negative here is all dependent on the very first term. Okay, 20 divided by 10 is 2. X second divided by x. Remainder x. 30 divided by 10 is 3. And then x divided by x is just a wipeout. So you put equals 0, and you have just rewrote that expression as 10x times 2x plus 3. Now I apply the zero product property. Either this can be 0 or this can be 0. So 10x can equal 0, or 2x plus 3 equals 0. Divide by 10, divide by 10, x equals 0. Got a times 2 here, so we're going to have to subtract 3 before dividing by 2. Negative 3 divided by 2 is negative 1.5. You can put that. That's an okay decimal to have. At least that's exact. Okay. Okay. Next problem. 5x to the second power equals 35x. The next two we're going to run into a little problem. So you have x to the second, and we have x. We have to factor. Okay, factoring properties. So two answers. 0, where are you at? We don't have it. So what you do is you go over here, you take out 35x by minusing, either plus or minus. This one would be minus to take that to a 0. But x can't go with x to the second. So what you do is you hang up negative 35x. Okay. Now I put equals 0, then I got to know that these cannot be combined. So we have x second and we have x. There's no constant, it's just 5, and that would be a negative 35 if you do it that way. You can write it like that, or you can write 5x to the second minus 35x. It's up to you. Okay, now 0's there. Now we do it just like the other problems. It's a binomial. We see the two terms, so factor out the GCF. And the equals 0 part will come back over here. So x, well, these both have x's. There's an x in the final term, the final one. So x, there's no negative in front, it's positive 5, and then 5 and 35 are both divisible by 5. And I go divide by 5x. If I divide by 5 is 1, dividing the x second by the x takes me to a remainder of x. Negative 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. Taking the x divided by the x is just a wipeout. So we have 5x times 1x minus 7. Take that stupid 1 away. Okay? I don't like 1's in front of x's when I factor at the end. I use 1's, but not at the end. When you're lining up your factors, if you have a 1, it shouldn't be there. Divide by 5, and x equals 0. Plus 7, x equals 7. 0 and 7. Okay, next problem. 6x to the second power minus 4x equals 3x to the second power plus 8x. So as I look through that, I have x to the second, I have x, and then I have them again. Don't write them again. Okay, once you've written x second and x, that's good enough. You know that at that point you have to factor. So to get the two answers, you need 0 in the equation. I don't have 0, so I put a 0 and get rid of the junk over there. But you don't have to hang anything like you did here, because you see minus 3x second would go with the 6x to the second. Now minus 8x I would get rid of, and that would go with the negative 4x. That is negative 4x. Now you're at 0. Now, you're subtracting, but you don't subtract the exponents, okay? Don't do that. Make x to the second, then x, then the constant. The exponents are not going anywhere when you add and subtract. They do when you divide and multiply, but not adding, subtracting. So 6 minus 3 is 3. And then negative 4 minus 8 is negative 12. It's not 4 minus 8, it's negative 4 minus 8. Now we're good, okay? Right there. So you get the 0 by taking these two terms out, okay? Just like here, I took the 1 term out. So we got two terms, it's a binomial, we have an x there. Negative in front, no. 3 and 12, both in 3's row. So 3x is the GCF. So that's 1. By now we should probably know that's x, and then negative 4, and then that's a wipeout. So we've rewritten that in factored form, 3x times 1x minus 4. Get the 1 out of there, it's x minus 4. So 3x could equal 0, or x minus 4 could equal 0. That's 0 for your first solution. And then plus 4, there's 4 for your second. Okay, now we're going to apply this to real life. Class of 2024 has seen this before. A golf ball is hit from the ground with a velocity of 96 feet per second. After how many seconds does it land on the ground? So we're not finding the maximum, okay? You're finding how many seconds it hits the ground. So we're not going to just make that giant parabola in the middle and find the vertex. It's not what we're asked to find. That's when you find a maximum. So what I'm going to do is put my units feet and seconds. The time is x, feet is y. Then per, feet per second. Well, that's feet per second's 96. Now, we're not going to make a table. We can't, because here's what happens. A golf ball goes up, but it goes back down. it's pulled up and down by a force known as gravity. Now there's a number for gravity we use with feet and seconds. It's not negative 9.8, that's meters and seconds. We use negative 16x to the second power, okay? Now, you're not going to make a line, obviously, okay? What you're going to make is an arch, because that's what a golf ball would do. Now, before the 96 feet per second, I don't see anything. So it started at 0 feet, and I don't see anything after it, so it must have ended at 0 feet. Now, here's how to write the equation. You need kind of a bigger box there. So, you're going to go blank x to the second plus blank x plus blank equals y, okay? So the gravity negative 16 is your x second coefficient, okay? Gravity's not in this problem, but I always use it when something goes up and comes down. Then 96. Now we started at 0 feet right there. So 0 feet goes here, but then that means that space doesn't exist. Now the 0 feet on the other side, okay, 0 feet, up here feet is equal to y, so 0 replaces the y. Okay. So now I have an equation, it's no longer a story problem. Make your solution box. You have x to the second and you have x, okay? You are using factoring properties. 2 answers, the zero's right there for me. I just need to put it in GCF form. There's a second step for 2-term binomials, which we'll get to later, but we don't need it today. X is in the last slot, negative is in the front, and then 16 and 96. Those are in row 16. So wrap it and divide by negative 16x. So that's positive 1. That's always going to be a remainder of x. Negative 6, and that cancels, okay? Now, I'm going to put my equals 0 over here. That's how I usually do it. And then I write my negative 16x, and then times the 1x minus 6. Get that 1 out of there. Okay, so negative 16x could equal 0, or x minus 6 could equal 0. Zero product property. Divide by negative 16, and you get 0. Over here you add 6, you get to 6. Now the reason you got 2 answers is because it's at 0 feet here, but that's before it jumps. So that's where your 0 seconds comes into play. You don't need to write this, okay? And then when it ends, that's the 6 seconds. 6 seconds is the answer, okay? The higher one. Okay, last problem. A missile shot close to the ground with a velocity of 128 feet per second. After how many seconds does it land, hit its ground target? So this is the same thing, feet and seconds. So seconds is x, feet is y. So per, feet per second. Feet per second is 128 times x. Okay, it goes up and down. So you know that's gravity, so you need negative 16x to the second power. So we don't make a table, we just draw a path up and down. Nothing before, 0 feet. Nothing after it, 0 feet. Those are FTs, what that says. Now, anytime we have to write an equation from a parabola, we're going to need an x second, an x, a constant, equals y. Okay, so negative 16 is my x second. 128 is my x. Now this right here, this 0, is put in the constant place, which means we will not have a constant. And then 0 feet is equal to y here, since 0 feet, feet equals y, feet equals y. Okay, all right, so you see the binomial. X second and x is factoring properties. So there's 2 answers. So you're at 0, you have a binomial on the other side. You have x on the end, you got to factor out x when it's on the end. Negative is in front, okay? then 16 and 128 are both in the row of 16. So then you divide by negative 16x. That's going to be 1x, and that's going to be negative 8. So put your equals 0 out here. Take the ridiculous 1 off. So negative 16x equals 0, x minus 8 equals 0. So divide by negative 16, and you get 0. Add the 8, and you get 8. 8's the real answer. Okay, 8 seconds.